Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge, a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services focusing on the Port of Anchorage and the major commercial participants in the Cook Inlet region, providing customers with marine services specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Hi everyone, and thanks again for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. On the advisory map here, high fire dangers out again today for the Madanuska and Susitna Valley areas, East Anchorage, the hillside, and the western Kenai Peninsula, that due to relative humidities of 15 to 25%, along with winds in some areas from the northeast 10 to 20 miles an hour, some local gusts of 30 miles an hour, especially along the inlet here, and that's why we included the western Kenai Peninsula. Now, those fire dangers will improve, or the conditions will improve this evening as the temperatures drop and the humidities go back up. On to the breakup map for today. Still a little bit more open water here around Nenana, on the Nenana River into the Tanana, and some open water there, Nebezna, some water moving at Northway as well up in that area, and still mostly open along the South Fork of the Kuskokwim River here in around Nikolai. And onto the satellites, a pretty wound up system here just east of Kodiak Island, starting to weaken a little bit here this afternoon, put a pretty good front up along the North Gulf Coast and down into the Panhandle. More of a wind than rain producer, at least from the reports. Cape Decision, east winds gusted to 71 miles per hour this morning before the front went through, but those have come down considerably and become more southerly, down to about 10 to 20 miles an hour currently in this area, with rain changing over to showers. And this up along the North Gulf Coast, really just a lot of mid and high level clouds spreading northward. The narrow rain band just getting Yakutat and barely even getting Cordova, and then some moisture slipping on down into Kodiak Island in the northeast flow. And only 0.06 of an inch falling at Kodiak State Airport in the last 24 hours. Sitka only picking up 0.07 of an inch, but Annette picked up about 0.16. That was the heaviest rainfall amount reported in the state, although some areas of the southeast there probably had heavier amounts than that. Next system out here to the west, pretty wound up as well, brought gale force winds this morning to Shemya and Attu, and that has since slid into the Adak area, getting west-northwest winds there of over 40 miles an hour in gusts, and that'll continue to push eastward here and bring some rain into the eastern Aleutians, eventually the Pribilof Islands, and then the whole system will weaken and pull back to the northwest. Otherwise, a lot of sunshine, Bristol Bay and the southwest coast, and northward across the Seward Peninsula and northeastward, all the way over to the border there. Again, this is just a lot of cirrus moving up from the south here, from this frontal system in the Gulf of Alaska. It might have been a couple isolated showers developing over the Wrangell Mountains, but nothing very widespread at all. And rolling that through again, you can see the fair conditions, a little more in the way of low clouds and fog up along the Arctic coast or along the North Slope, a lot more in the way of fog along the Arctic coast there, with Kaktovik down to a quarter mile earlier this morning in dense fog, and areas of low clouds and fog all along the coast into the afternoon. That'll probably continue. No change expected there over the next couple of days, with winds staying on the light side from the east-northeast. And on the chart here this morning, this is the position of the front as it's moved inland and weakening, and the winds have come down, and again bending back around into Kodiak Island there, but really not a lot of precipitation with it, just a narrow band right there in the vicinity of the front. And the next system coming across the Bering Sea, we'll see tonight, slips on down, slides into the eastern Aleutians for some rain, and that'll extend back up into the Pribilof. Look for periods of rain later tonight and tomorrow. And then the whole system will tend to pull back to the northwest and actually pull northward and back a little bit, as the low center weakens and pulls to the northwest as this next one comes in from the west and begins to take over. So we're going to be in for a couple of wet days there over the Pribilof Islands starting later tonight and tomorrow. Warm front, risk of rain into the Alaska Peninsula. Then the cold front will bring rain to the central Aleutians and more wind with the next system coming in. Otherwise, for tomorrow, look for some scattered showers to develop over the southeast interior, possibly even over the White Mountains. Look for some scattered isolated showers, even over the Talkeetnas, and possibly the Chugach Mountains may see a shower or two develop in the afternoon with variably cloudy skies. Otherwise, no change to the north and no change to the west here. Another mostly sunny day in just about all of those areas with light winds and the variable clouds, variable low clouds and fog up along the Arctic coast. And looks like showers tonight and then showers tomorrow, and then rain in the afternoon here as another impulse moves, or another frontal boundary pushes up into the, keeps it wet in the southeast coast there. Main low center off the coast here, another system developing along the frontal boundary there. That's going to move northward and bring a heavier dose of rain in late tomorrow and tomorrow night in across the southeast coast. And that'll move right up into the Yukon, right up to this position on Tuesday. And another low center, the original one here, will pull back to the west. And so you're in a wet weather pattern there, southwesterly flow. This one will move up Tuesday night and Wednesday, and then back into showers on Thursday, maybe diminishing on Friday. And then as the whole upper system moves through, maybe drying out for the weekend for the Panhandle, but it's going to be, you're going to be in a wet weather pattern up until Friday or Saturday of this next week. Otherwise, that next system comes from the western Aleutians, moves quite rapidly to the Alaska Peninsula, links up with some of the leftover moisture from the first system. So look for periods of rain tomorrow night, tomorrow night and Tuesday here for the Pribilofs. Down across the Alaska Peninsula, look for periods of rain from about Pilot Point all the way out to Unalaska and Nikolsky. Then quite an area of gusty west-northwest winds and showers following in, extending out to Shimia and the Attu area. Otherwise, the best chance for any precipitation over mainland Alaska will be these isolated, widely scattered showers that may develop, say, around Eagle, down toward North and Tokeway, over the Talkeetna Mountains, maybe along the Alaska Range. Some of that could scatter out all the way to the Kuskokwim Mountains, maybe out to the Kuskokwim or the Yukon Delta, but nothing very significant at all, just partly to mostly cloudy skies with those afternoon showers. I mean, partly sunny as well, staying dry and mostly sunny, and maybe a little bit more of a northeast breeze, 15 to maybe 20 miles an hour, possibly through the Brooks Range, some of the higher elevation areas, but that's about it. No change on the Arctic coast. Still looking at low clouds and fog creating marginal to IFR conditions at any time of the day, both day and night, but of course the lowest conditions will be in the late night and early morning hours like they have been. And again, wet weather for the southeast coast. Temperatures down there today held down with the clouds and the wind, with upper 40s to near 50. 52 at Skagway, one of the warmer locations, with Sitka at 46, Kawak at 48, Stewart had the same temperature, and Yakutat 48 degrees. A little bit of rain fell today, but not much. 54 at Cordova, same temperature reported from Valdez. Cooler in the Copper River Basin there at the 51 at Golkena. 55 at Northway, Fairbanks 53. I'm sorry, that's Delta with 53. Fairbanks 59, they had the warm spot in the state today. They hit 60 at some point during the afternoon hours. 57 over there at Eagle, and 55 at Fort Yukon. 50 degrees at Bettles with 34 at Anatuvik, while Arctic Village reported 39. Temperatures kind of chilly along portions of the Arctic coast, but well above zero. 20 degrees at Barrow and 10 degrees at Nuiqsut with 27 over at Kaktovik. Upper teens here for the western coast. 20 to 25 here for the northwest areas, with 20 degrees there at Buckland, 24 in Kotzebue, and that 20 from Kivalina. Right at the freeze point this afternoon at Nome with 32, 17 Tin City, but Savunga up to 25. Back into the valleys here, 56 at McGrath, and mid-50s down the Kuskokwim River Valley. Get out to the Delta and it drops down to about 50 at Bethel, then looking at upper 20s here along the southwest coast. And that 54 there on the edge of the map is at king salmon 54, Iliamna 54, and the western temperatures didn't quite make it today. So moving on to the lows tonight, they're mostly in the 40s out here. Today be in the upper 30s for the lows tonight, lower 30s for the Pribilofs, lower to mid 30s here for the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay. Otherwise, teens up along the Arctic coast and the North Slope to 20s through the Brooks Range. And then mostly in the mid 30s here, staying above freezing there over the Tanana Valley in a few areas. Otherwise, Copper Basin, upper 20s from Tok down in toward Gulkana and to the lower 30s. Mid to upper 30s here for south central Alaska, Prince William Sound, near 40 out along the coast, and lower 40s for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow for the Aleutians, mid to upper 40s, except cooler out in the west and cooler up around the Pribilofs with upper 30s forecast. Into the 20s along the Arctic coast and the North Slope with 30s to maybe even lower 40s there for the Brooks Range, and then into the 40s across the Koyukuk and upper Yukon Valley areas. Mid 50s here through the Tanana Valley over to the 40-mile country, with 50s down toward McGrath and Nikolai, and actually all the way down to Bethel once again, otherwise 40s, and a little milder out along the southwest coast. The Macoriac forecast high of 38 degrees, 48 for Kodiak, otherwise upper 40s to mid 50s here across south central Alaska, and upper 40s to maybe lower 50s for the Panhandle. Flying weather, look for occasional marginal VFR all along the southeast coast tomorrow and out into the Gulf of Alaska. And then this moisture coming in from the east from that front that pushed up, coming back. Could be some areas of IFR over the Wrangell Mountains and maybe over the Talkeetnas as well tomorrow morning, but marginal VFR more likely there, Prince William Sound. East side and southern portion of the Kenai Peninsula, maybe some marginal VFR up into the Tanana Valley. Marginal VFR due to low clouds and fog, mostly along the eastern and central Arctic coast, with some patchy IFR due to the visibilities below 3 miles in fog at times, especially in the morning hours. Not too bad out to the west and southwest, just some patchy areas of marginal VFR off the coast, and then that next system pushing eastward, IFR from the Pribilofs down to, say, Cape Sarachev, maybe False Pass, but not too bad, breaking out behind the front. And then the moisture with that next system bringing more IFR into the western Aleutians. Passes, Anatuvik, VFR on either approach, same forecast for Adigan, VFR as well. Lake Clark and Merrill looking good, VFR, but rainy, could be marginal at times throughout the day tomorrow. Windy, marginal VFR, Isabel occasionally marginal, and Mentasto looks a little marginal as well, with Tanita marginal on the eastern approach, otherwise VFR through the pass. For Portage, marginal VFR, either entrance, and for Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels is again not much of a temperature gradient across the state at all, maybe 2,000 feet here over the Tanana Valley and the Alaska Range, otherwise 2,000 to 4,000 feet down there at Dixon Entrance, and then closer to the jet here, a little bit more of a thermal gradient, 2,000 feet right along the Aleutians, and then rising to 6,000 feet to the south. And icing threats again with that front pushing and then sliding southeast, where could be some areas of rime icing from the Alaska Peninsula up across the Pribilofs, hit and miss areas, and then a bigger batch coming into the western Aleutians with that next system, and then maybe some moderate turbulence over the southern southeast coast, mostly below the 12,000 foot level, with areas of extending right up into the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay areas, then cutting off right around Yakutat. Upper level wind flow chart here shows upper low in the Gulf of Alaska and south to southwest flow. That's going to send several impulses and keep it wet through much of the week here, especially tomorrow and Tuesday, or tomorrow night and Tuesday, and then into Wednesday. Then again, this whole low lifts out later in the week and looks pretty good again toward late in the week to the weekend. And at 9,000 feet, high pressure for light variable winds over Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. A little bit more wind coming in with that next system here to the west, but just 20 to 25 knots over the Aleutians. Northeasterlies 10 to 15 over the interior. Still a little breezy around this low, sitting over the southern Gulf of Alaska, but nothing too terribly strong at all. And at 3,000 feet, much the same pattern. Northeasterlies anywhere from 0 to 15 knots over the interior, and westerlies 20 to 35 knots out over the Aleutians. Turbulence, maybe some moderate chop here along the east side of Kodiak Island, otherwise pretty turbulence-free just about everywhere else except for that next system entering the far western Aleutians. And after the break, I'll be back with a marine forecast.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How? Using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often we don't, at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Thoman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back. Well, southeasterly small craft advisory type winds, 25 to 30 knots all along the southeast coast here on the outer coastline. Inside waters to the south, southeast 25, seas 5 feet, and then becoming north 10 to 15 knots over the central and northern inside waters with seas running 2 to 3 feet. And then for Tuesday, southerlies 25 knots, southeast 25 here, down to 15 on the north coast, southeast 25 over the for Clarence Strait, and then down to about 20 knots there for Stevens Passage. Lynn Canal, northern Lynn Canal, southerlies 20 knots in the afternoon with seas at about 4 feet. And then for Cook Inlet tomorrow, light variable winds all the way down to Kamishak Bay, Prince William Sound, light variable winds 10 knots or less, seas pretty slight. And easterlies at 25 here for the North Gulf Coast, and then 20 to 25 knot winds from the northeast all the way down the east side of Kodiak Island. And then for Tuesday, southerlies at about 10 in the afternoon for Cook Inlet, west 15 for the Kamishak Bay area, west 20 for the Barren Islands and the western Gulf Coast. Another light variable wind day for Prince William Sound. Out to Bristol Bay, light variable winds in store for that area tomorrow at 10 knots with seas 4 feet, light southwesterlies down the coastline. Alaska Peninsula west winds at 20 knots, north 20 knots here from Sitkinak over to about Chignik. And then those become light westerlies at 15 on Tuesday, southwest at 25 here for the Pacific side of the peninsula, south 20 for the Bering Sea side, light southwest breeze for Bristol Bay with seas just 3 feet. Out in the Aleutians, 20 to 25 knots south-southwesterlies here for the central areas tomorrow. Otherwise, westerlies at 15 to 20 for the Fox Islands, and southeast 20 knots way out there to the west. Those come northwest at 30 knots there on Tuesday with some westerly gales here blowing in toward AKwx. But for that zone, though, mostly southwest at 30, west-southwesterlies 25 to 30 knots. Good for small craft advisories for all areas of the Fox Islands. And for the Pribilofs tomorrow, southeast at 20, east 25 here for the northern Bering Sea, otherwise northeast 10 to 15. And then light variable winds here on the north side of Nunivak Island with northeasterlies at 20 from St. Lawrence Island down into the Bering Sea, southeast 20 with 8-foot seas for the Pribilofs. For the eastern Arctic coast tomorrow, 10 to 15 knot easterlies there for the Beaufort Sea coastline. Central coast north at 5, that's pretty light with 10 knot winds from the north or northeast all the way down the remainder of the coastline. And then for Tuesday, 20 knots from Wales to Cape Thompson, these western capes, a little more northeasterly there at about 20 knots, dropping back to 15, then to easterlies at 10 knots here from the central coast all the way over to Demarcation Point. And for tonight, again, this front, looking for it to move through, and showers in the forecast tonight and then showers tomorrow, changing to rain as this system develops and moves northward. That'll spread a heavier amount of rain up. So tomorrow night you get some solid rain as that moves up, and then this next system will begin to pull in behind. See, that one kicks up into Canada on Tuesday. This next one poised to move in, so a couple of wet days coming up, if not longer, for the southeast coast there, and rain here for the Alaska Peninsula and the Pribilofs in the next couple of days as well. And otherwise, just some isolated showers over the southern interior, isolated to maybe widely scattered with some variable clouds, staying pretty fair and dry, maybe a little bit more of a northeast breeze up over the northern interior.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.